So I'll let you guys know when.
I'm just gonna read. I'll open it up.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, we're live.
All right, everybody. How you guys doing out there? And thanks for joining us. This is kind of a wrap up for the Bridgman month that I was doing, talking about the new Bridgman project that many of you are probably so tired of hearing about by now. But yeah. So tonight we're not going to do a demo. What I have in store is I just wanted to wrap it up with a police helicopter out here, right outside our studio.
That's wild.
Nice. Literally, I think he's going to land on our roof. So that's an exciting way to start a Friday Night Live. You'd think we were, down in some random place, but we're in a pretty nice place right by the beach. But that being said, so anyway, now I got to get my train of thought. That's really funny. Well, not funny, but that's interesting. Okay, so who I brought in Erik Gist here, who's one of my best friends and one of the teachers from the Atelier that many of you know, and he's been with me for, what, 20?
Since 96, however long that
It's
is.
a long time, 20-some years. So the school's about 27 years old, and I think you've probably been with me 25 years, 24 years. I mean, so anyway, he's my right-hand guy, and one of the reasons I brought actually Erik in is because he's taught this Bridgman class that I originally taught it at the school. We're gonna have to go. If you can go lock the door too, just lock the door. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting. Talking over a police helicopter that's literally in the parking lot. That's so ironic. Okay, so what I want to say is that actually Erik has taught the Bridgman class, which this particular book that I came out with is kind of a little bit of a flip or an iteration on the original class that I designed, I don't know, say 20 years ago. And when I first started wanting to teach Bridgman, the reason I liked it so much was that I was a huge fan of Frank Frisetta. And everyone knows that Frank Frisetta is probably not only the grandmaster of comic art and figure invention, but was one of the artists that I thought actually exemplified Bridgman's work better than anybody, right? It was a clean version of Bridgman. It looked like Bridgman's concepts, but it wasn't all piecey and fragmented and chaotic and difficult to read. So what I would do is I would look at Frisetta's work, and then I would cross-reference Bridgman's work, and then I'd go back and forth, and I'd already been used to drawing from Frisetta since I was a little kid, and so I would constantly be doing that kind of extrapolation between the two. And so when I first started teaching my first anatomy class, because I didn't know the names of the anatomy very well, I was in my early 20s, I called it Intuitive Anatomy, and I taught it from a combination of Bridgman. We would redraw the Bridgman drawings, cleaning them up in a very more kind of tonal style, similar to the Riley method. So I would use Riley concepts mixed with Bridgman. Now, a lot of people don't know that Frank Riley was the monitor for George Bridgman back in the day. And so George Bridgman had a huge lineage of great illustrators, including Norman Rockwell and people of that ilk that had trained with him. So he was at the Art Students League. He taught for, 40 years and was an iconic anatomy teacher. Now, one of the things I ran into with Bridgman that we've talked about in these last couple Friday Night Lives was that I couldn't quite figure out what lines in his drawings were the ones I was supposed to be memorizing and using, and which ones were just indications of shadow, or maybe it was kind of a shadow, because you couldn't really tell where the shadow pattern was on the drawings very often. The one I demoed, the profile one that I like so much, which is that iconic drawing of his, is probably the one that I thought had the best potential of being able to be read, sort of like a tonal drawing. So what we did is we would extrapolate, and then we'd also work from muscle builders, and that's something I, instead of working from like a really exaggerated lean muscle builder, like a female bodybuilder that was on steroids, which sounds kind of crazy, but that is kind of like more of an ideal male physique. So we would extrapolate between these three different modes. So when I did this book, what I wanted to do is get a model that I thought would look the most like a Frisetta or a Bridgman character, and that was Yoni Baker, and it's bakermodel.com, I think is his.
Ed Baker Model would be his Instagram. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the.
And you should look him up. He's in the. I put his information in the book. He has some really good books you can draw from of his photos of him in different poses, and he's a really great guy. So I just want to give a shout out to Yoni, one of our favorite models. But anyway, he looked literally like he walked out of the Bridgman book. So I took him and I shot him in the iconic poses in the Bridgman book. Now this particular Bridgman book, as I mentioned, is really primarily just the first in a series. Well, there's two of them right now that I have planned. The second one is about halfway through. That's arms and legs. This one's torso, front, and back. And I just, the courses are going to be split in two too. So there'll be a 20-hour course that goes along with this, and then there'll be a 20-hour course that goes along with the arms and legs. And so anyway, what I wanted to do tonight is just talk a little bit about our influences with Bridgman, what it's meant to us, this particular method, this particular iconic anatomist that many of you are familiar with, or maybe you have the book. Most people do. What you'll need to remember too is this book has many iterations. This is one of the older copies of it. I think it's on its 5th printing, and you can. It doesn't matter which one you get; they're all the same, right? They're all the same information in. So don't worry so much if you find one on eBay that's older. You can basically just buy that and you'll be fine. So I don't know which one the new one looks like. If this is a lot older. It's not the best printed. So what you're going to have to run into is, again, you may want to look at my drawings and look at his drawings and draw more from my drawings than his drawing. But do both. Draw from his, draw from mine, go back and forth. That's what it's designed to do. In there, there's QR codes, and you're going to want to, again, click on the QR codes and watch me do a little shorthand version of that drawing. Now, if you really like that, you can go through the whole book and just do it that way, right? And if that works for you, and you're tight on cash or you can't do the class, but I highly recommend doing the class. It's like $49 for a month. I mean, it's quite a bargain. I mean, if you're looking at a good, where I'm going to do every drawing in that book more or less, start to finish, with verbal, telling you what I like and I don't like. I mean, that would have been a godsend back when I was in there. So, Erik, you've seen it. You kind of know how you do the class. What do you? I mean, you do it a little differently, and you've done so much anatomy. I mean, you're one of the guys that could have easily done that book, But
yeah, I mean, it's a great book. Like I said, I mean, it's something I would have loved to have had when I was a student. I had the class. In fact, some of my drawings from that class. Early on, we had the wall and we had the brochure, and you put student drawings on the brochure and on the wall. My first drawing I ever got on the brochure was actually from the first time I took that class. So for whatever reason, I just had an affinity for it. It's probably because Bridgman was actually one of the first drawing books I ever got. Mm-hmm. Like even before I started at the school, when I was like, I guess it would have been when I was a junior in high school, because that was the first time I went to Comic-Con. And I'm sure I had other drawing books, how to draw comics the Marvel way, but more like kid-friendly stuff, like whatever, how to draw Warner Brothers characters, or how to draw whatever, the kind of the cheesier ones that you find at bookstores. But one of my first real drawing books would have been How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. But the second one, I went to Comic-Con in '92, whenever I was a junior. '92, so I'm old. And when I went there, I showed around my drawings, and they were terrible. And almost every editor and art director that I talked to and pro that I talked to are like, you need to work on your figure drawing, you need to work on your anatomy, and every single one of them said Bridgman and Hogarth. So I went to Crown Books or whatever it was at the time, and I basically ordered all of it. If they didn't have them, I ordered those books. Because Loomis wasn't in print at the time. I think someone probably mentioned Loomis, but Loomis wasn't in print. You'd have to go and dig it up at used bookstores. So I went there and I ordered the ones I could order, Bert Hogarth, George Bridgman, and I liked Hogarth, but I loved Bridgman. I still to this day don't know why, but his drawings resonated with me. So that's probably why some of my first drawings that, you sort of recognize as being good were from that book.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because my only wall, I got a couple wall hangers, and what you see behind us is what we call wall hangers, right? That's our wall of fame for the people that have come through the school that exemplify extreme, love of the craft, but also a drawing that could be beneficial for other students to be inspired by who come in and study with us. So my first drawing on the wall at the school I went to was that Bridgman drawing that is that profile drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like the first one that I got in there, and it was like a sepia, burnt sienna drawing with white chalk on newsprint, and it was kind of different for our class at the time because we most of our drawings looked like this. I don't know why I did it that way, but I remember I was going to bring it in tonight, and unfortunately I forgot it. But it was my sketchbook from high school, and that has mostly Bridgman in it. I think most of the Bridgman book was the first time I drew through it all the way through. Was probably in like 9th or 10th grade. And so I was familiar with the Bridgman. My dad had the Bridgman book. This is probably his copy, actually. This is an old copy, and I'm pretty sure this was the one that I drew from as a kid. That one I didn't know what to do with it. Again, my dad is more of a technical illustrator type. I mean, he's great with everything, but he wasn't as much of an anatomist as I am. I mean, he didn't love it as much as I do. I like the figure like he likes cars and trains and planes and tech and all that stuff and perspective. So I was drawn to it. I didn't know what to do with it, so I copied it linear. And I remember I did it in Sharpies and I did it in just different pencil techniques. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't. I didn't understand that you were trying to get wedging and the understanding of insertions and origins and wedging and kind of dynamics of form and how he explains the mechanics of the human form as a machine. And that's really what the value of Bridgman to me is. It's a mechanical drawing book on how to break the body down into its mechanics as a machine. And so if you like structural drawing, you like I do, like drawing that's heavily wedged and has a really dynamic feel like that. The thing that it's lacking, which I can't really get into in this book, and I'll have to do it down the road in another book form, is the Riley method. Because the Riley rhythms mixed with the Bridgman wedging is a pretty insane combination of information. And so when you go through this book, you're going to see me using some of that Riley method, but I couldn't stop and teach it in there because that's a whole separate thing, right? So you can learn it if you want to learn it from us. You can go onto the drawing program and take it online with streaming or with our regular, and just work your way through the phases, and you're going to get a thorough understanding of it through Brian, through myself, through Erik, Lucas, and you're going to get an understanding of that, and then you can mesh it with this. Also, what I wanted to say is, if you really love this book and you love the course, you should take Erik's intensives, because he does an intensive version of arms and legs and torso, front, back, where you get into all the insertions, origins, splayed, overlapping, and it's an absolutely phenomenal 2 phases, like 2 of the strongest phases on the online probably. That and the draper you did are all phenomenal. So you can marry the 2 together. You can do this one first and then do the other 2, and then go back and do this one. This one is I think of it as a fundamental class and a beginner class, but there's no easy way to break Bridgman down. I mean, you're gonna look at it and say, that looks really advanced to me. What do you mean that's a beginning class? And I would say, well, you can only dumb it down so much. I mean, it is what it is.
I would say fundamental would be a better term than beginning. But
yeah.
I mean, there's no such thing as beginning with anatomy. Anatomy just it isn't.
I mean, I guess what you do is if you want to do beginning, mannequinizing, right?
Yeah.
Block form, ovoid form, skeletal. I go through all that in the online. Brian's exceptional at it. I mean, he's got a great knack for it. But a lot of you are probably going to wonder, like, hey, how do I use this book? Do I just do this course? What do I do? It's something it's a passion project for me. It was something I felt benefited me greatly in school. Everyone said, go get the Bridgman book, go draw, go draw from it. And that was it. They never did a class on it. They never taught you how to do it, never taught you how to interpret it. So you're really kind of just left on your own to muddle through the thing. And it really felt like there should be a better way to get through that thing. And it took me about 10 years to really teaching it, reverse engineering it, using the Frisetta to go off of, going back and forth with different comic artists I liked, and really understanding figure invention and how it worked into that, to really say, okay, I feel like I could do a version of how to study this that would actually be really, really helpful to people. And so that's my hopes, is that it can help you to really, really speed up that process. So in the book, we will be working from photos. We will be working photo interpretations, Bridgman interpretations, redrawing most of the Bridgman book. If you get into this course and you say, hey, those black-white techniques are just way too overwhelming for me, then don't do them. Just do the charcoal. Repurpose that drawing as a charcoal drawing. You know, don't necessarily feel like you have to do all those. Or you could, if you're really more advanced, you could say, well, I like that. I really love doing that drawing charcoal, but I'd love to try it in the black and white. Then go do it in the black and white. You know, repurpose it. Do it in ballpoint pen as well. So I'm giving you 3 different techniques that I think are good for different aspects of your brain development, your hand development. Ballpoint pen requires you can cheat a little bit with it, especially the big pens. You can kind of do little lay-in lines very lightly, like you would with a pencil. You're just not going to be able to erase them, so you got to be very delicate. But you can, big pens are probably the closest and the most user-friendly pen option. But it's going to make you have to do more conviction with your decision making. The white Prismacolor black is going to make you work in reverse. So you're now designing with the shadows already being present, and you're going to work all your light masses around it, kind of scrunching in on the shadows. Whereas normally, in the charcoal technique, we're going to work our way up to the shadows through mapping and through linear lay-ins, injecting a middle value range, putting the dark in, bringing it up to a finish. So those two are almost opposite ways of thinking, but I want you to not get bored, I want you to not burn out, and I want you to have fun doing it, and I want you to be challenged as well. So that was kind of the impetus by why I picked the 3 different techniques. I could have picked 10 other ones, but that was my, that's a little bit of a twist. We don't teach it like that really in the bridge. We don't teach those different techniques in the actual class when we teach it at school.
No, I think I remember you kind of going over it, a couple times maybe, but yeah, it wasn't really a main thrust of the class. It was more just mainly about cleaning up Bridgman's rather cryptic drawings. So the great information is in there. But I remember one thing you told me when I was first starting out at the school, because again, I was totally enamored with Bridgman. It was one of the things that brought me to the school. But you kind of said, well, you kind of have to know this stuff before you can learn this stuff. And at 20 years old, 21 years old, I was just like, thanks, Yoda. Awesome. That's really helpful. But then I took the class, and by the end of the class, I totally understood what you were talking about. It's like, okay, right now, just sort of study the wedging and the shapes. Don't worry about origins, insertions, all that stuff. I mean, yeah, that's helpful and it's useful for sure. But when it comes to just designing the stuff and drawing the stuff and what you can use in your own work, it's more about that design of the wedging and the blocking and the sort of mechanical functionality of the human body, not so much about just rote memorization, which is how we often are taught to learn things nowadays. Even back when we were kids, it's like you learn this date, you learn this general's name, and by the time you got into the end of the class, you really didn't learn anything about history. You just sort of memorized factoid, but you didn't understand how this event led to this event, led to this event, which brings us to where we are today. Yeah. And you taught the Bridgman class more like actually teaching real history. It was like, okay, this is the thing you need to learn to be able to design this knee because it functions this way, and that's why it now looks more three-dimensional. And it just sort of clicked in my head that it's like, oh, you and I kind of disagree fundamentally on reading the book. You are basically of the schools like, don't read it all. I think you should read it once.
Yeah, and I have read through it. The thing that would give you with the reading was simply, he would name muscles differently than other people. So he used either a different Latin derivative for a muscle that didn't mix with Beverly Hale or didn't mix over with Goldfinger.
Or a made-up name that was a combination of 3 muscles.
Yeah, so I think for me, I like to cut through the chase and learn the nitty-gritty of it. And I really didn't learn the names because for number one, I have a good academic handle on things, but I don't normally gravitate towards academia in art. I learn extremely well by emulation and basic mimicry. And so what I always valued in an art book was the more good images I could get into my head through copying, the better the book was and more valuable to me.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? So, and it's very hard to find anyway a book that's written well by an artist. I think the one that I would say far exceeds all these is Richard Schmidt's book, Alla Prima, would be the best written. It's very well written and it's very intellectually sound, and it is a great book. So I would say, I've read that one. I will read. I read Harold Speed's book on drafting, and that if you can get through that one, man, holy.
Gurney's books.
Yeah, There's a number of them, but most of them, quite frankly, and that's one reason why you'll see in this book too. I did not put in all the anatomical names because there's a million books with those in there, And you don't need another anatomy book filled 3/4 of the way through with the same stuff you've learned or is in every other book. And I think a lot of artists, quite frankly, do that just to fill a book up. It means less drawings. It means less work to do drawings. It means what I wanted to do is not only bring you as many images that you could copy as possible that would interpret his drawings, but then also get inside my head and listen to why I like it, why I don't like it. So if in this book, because there are some drawings I put in after the fact that I did not shoot, because the original class was shot 5 years ago, and it took 5 years for me to finish the freaking book. And there were many reasons for that. There were layers of complexities and difficulties with what I could do and couldn't do with it. And so it got shelved many times. The pandemic knocked it off releasing a year ago, so it kicked another year off. And so it's been quite an event bringing it to fruition. But where was I going with that? I was talking about something specific that I wanted to address. It'll come back to me. But the book is unique from the standpoint that the audio codes in it. So if I did a drawing that I didn't shoot or film, like there's these little pages in here that are really cool. They're practice pages, and they're pages of me doing ballpoint penny interpretations of Frisetta drawings and stuff, you know. And those little pages, although many people might find them, I don't know, they're these little pages. I don't know if you can see it from there. But they're little pages of like written. So I don't think I filmed that one really when I did them to warm up or whatever. And they were practice pages for me working the concepts out for the book. So I did an audio code that you can click on and listen to me talk about what I was doing in those. Why I did them, why I liked them, why do I do this, why do I do that. So the thing that I've always wanted I would have loved to have had a book on Frisetta where Frisetta was talking about his technique. Dude, as he did it, right in front of you, painting an iconic, the Molly Hatchet cover or something, and he's talking about the knee, and he's in there painting it, and you're getting to listen to him basically talk his way through his working method, That would have been like freaking gold. Or Bridgman talking about his drawings and in his book coming alive. So when I wanted a book, I thought, what a cool book if you could just have a book that actually had the teacher or the guy doing it talking and doing all of the images, and you could watch him do it, or whatever. I mean, so it is kind of a groundbreaking book. I know there's been some books that have used QR codes in them, but not to the extent I think that this one I intended with this one. So you literally have like 5 hours of content probably shoved into this thing, on top of the drawings that you're going to be working from. So it should walk you through it very logically. I know many of you have gotten the memo with me talking about this, but sometimes when I'm demoing, like in the last couple of weeks, I lose track and I'm trying to explain the book while I'm trying to draw something, and I don't know how articulate it's really coming off. People, I don't want them to be confused with the book or get it and say, I didn't know it was going to be this or that. Or I think, it's going to be a good one for your library. But the other thing we're going to do in there is you need to pick up some Frisetta books probably if you're going to be doing it, right? So you're going to want the Bridgman book. You're going to need this book. And you're going to need some Frisetta books, right? Because in the Frisetta, when I do the Frisettas in there, I can't put Frisetta's images in the book, right? So but I tell you what image I'm working from, like it's the mammoth or it's this. I'll give you the painting. I mean, you can look it up on Google or you buy a book. I would pick up some of Frisetta's books anyway. I have every one of them. I have 62 books on the guy. Icon, Testament. I mean, I love the names. Living Legacy. Legacy. They're all these like best painter ever, but he kind of was. So any of these, even just one of these, would be a great book to pick up to go along with this book. But again, you'll know which Frisettas I'm working from. But they're my interpretations of Frisetta, and they're done in different mediums. And it's basically me. The three things I really want to get across is what you see, okay, and that's or what you know, and that's gonna be studying this stuff, right? The academia, right? So you're studying what do I know about the arm? What do I know about the wedging of the torso? What do I know about this? So you got to intellectually get a good grasp of it. And that's going to be this book, and you may want to have Elliot Goldfinger's book out with you. You may want to have Sarah Siblett's book out with out. You may want to have someone like Michael Hampton. Probably is more of a rudimentary kind of construction stuff. It's a wonderful book, and I think you should have it. May help with this, but probably not quite as helpful
No,
as.
some of the stuff that would be good would be some of the apps that are out there too, like
Oh yeah, the visual.
what
Yeah,
is it, Visible Body or Invisible Body, whatever it is. Some of those anatomy apps for artists are great, really, really good, because you can just really pinpoint areas and strip back the muscles, which Bridgman does a lot in his books, and Jeff does also, obviously, in his, where some of those cutaways, and those are the areas that I always actually did read, because I was like, what is he even, I don't know.
what is he even talking about?
Yeah, I mean, if you know the anatomy, you know what he's doing, but I'm not, I'm studying because I'm trying to learn the anatomy, and then there'll be like little excerpts, because I think the book was actually put together by students from their notes. Not
I don't believe it was put together by Bridgman.
No, because it's all over the place and makes. But there'll be, you can tell there's little snips that they took directly from his lecture. But to find those little snippets is almost impossible. Which is what's great about your book, is you kind of isolate the text that is in there. You kind of isolated those important bits that it's like the reason that this is this way because of this, and this, and then it's like one little paragraph where you'd have to read through like 5 pages of gibberish in the Bridgman book to get that.
And even then, you'd have to, you might have to do it 5 or 6 times because that's what I talk about when I say gutting a book, like taking a book and pulling out the essential information from it. Some books are only good for certain things. Some I will buy specifically for one chapter, and the rest of it, I don't want that. It's not beneficial to where I'm going. And so when you're taking a book like this or Loomis or any of them, and you have to learn how to extrapolate what's essential in that. That is an art that I found in and of itself, right? That is the art of learning to train yourself to learn how to think. Now, a lot of people try to hack a lot of stuff, and I know we have a lot of that. It doesn't work, okay? I mean, and when I say hack, it's like, I suppose I am hacking it by ripping it apart like that, but it's literally like a science. It's not lazy, lackadaisical efforts. It's extremely intense thinking, looking, reflecting, trying. It's reverse engineering something. It's like taking a piece of engineering equipment and reverse engineering an engine, to figure out how it works. It's not the easiest way to do it, but sometimes it's the only option you have. And so without a book like this, that's your option, right? That's the option I had. It was like, okay, here's a book that I know is important. I can see value in it. What am I going to do with that? How am I supposed to get through that? And again, I didn't have one anatomy class in school. And it wasn't because our school wasn't good. It was one of the best schools I could find at the time, by far. Probably one of the best that I could have gone to. But there was no one willing to teach it, and you have to find someone, number one, crazy enough to teach it, right? And that has a huge passion for it. And even if you find someone with a passion for it, usually they're either working and to take time out of your heavy schedule to come teach an anatomy class when you really are working at DreamWorks or something or whatever, it's not going to happen. It's too much work. It's too much work, and if you have a family on top of that, luckily Erik and I don't have a family. We are each other's family. No, the school is kind of our family.
We don't have kids.
We don't have kids, is what I'm saying. So it gives us a little extra time to do stuff like that, really, quite frankly. I don't know if I could do any of this stuff, a lot of this stuff, if I had had certain other responsibilities in my life. I simply would not have had the bandwidth. And or I would have blown a gasket, because I almost blew a gasket anyway.
But also the genius of it and the way you broke it down, and one of the things that always helped me the most and still continues to help me today, because that's how I study almost everything, is you didn't just teach the Bridgman book. As you said, you'd bring in clippings out of female bodybuilder magazines, which I know that was always a lot of fun, going to the magazine stores and buying a stack of female bodybuilder.
Yeah, they looked at me quite weird.
Yeah,
like,
hey, whatever you're into.
Yeah, man, that's all good. I'm like, yeah. I started owning it by the end, man. I'm like, whew.
I like strong women.
Yeah, I like strong women.
So, but what you would do is you'd draw the Bridgman drawings, and then you would have photos that were like, I remember, again, this was like
I still have that huge stack.
Early days of the digital age, right? So you just bring in these like boxes, cardboard boxes, just with clippings just stacked up. And what we would do is we would draw the Bridgman drawing, and then we would find a female bodybuilder in a similar type of pose, which now we have Yoni,
yeah,
and you can shoot it exactly,
yeah,
which is even better. But back then, you'd have us draw the Bridgman drawing and then draw the bodybuilder drawing. And what always was genius about that to me, and I discovered later on, and it's how I started teaching myself a lot of things, was that, I study this technical bit of information, and then I draw a real-world equivalent. And what would happen is that I'd take some of the Bridgman over into that drawing, and that was cool. But then what was even cooler is then I'd go back to the Bridgman drawing. This funny thing started happening where I started taking some of the bodybuilder and injecting it into my Bridgman drawings, and then taking some of my Bridgman drawings and injecting it into my bodybuilder drawings. And they started almost merging, where
Yeah.
It's almost hard to tell the difference between the two sometimes, which one was done from Bridgman, which one was done from bodybuilding. As I started my career, I started doing that with a lot of things. I'd study this artist. Like when I started learning illustration, I would copy a Rockwell, and then I would go and shoot some photo reference or find some photo reference that was Rockwellian, and then paint it and try to make it look like a Rockwell.
And still his colors and put them into
Right,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
It would just start this ping-ponging back and forth, and it sort of taught me how to teach myself. You teaching me to do that, which is how you taught yourself.
Yeah.
It started teaching me how to teach myself any number of different things. Basically, how to gut it, like you said, how to dissect things. But you can't just dissect the book.
No.
You need a Rosetta Stone of a sort, right? It's like, okay, this is what Bridgman's drawing. This is what it looks like in real life. And then you go, oh, okay, well now that makes sense. Like you'll see this, wedging of a thigh on Bridgman, and I look at that. If you don't know what you're doing, which obviously you don't because you're studying Bridgman, and you go, what the hell? I know. I mean, it's a cool shape. I'm going to steal that shape, and I'm going to put it right there. But then all of a sudden you get Yoni. He comes in. He sits up on the stage in a similar pose, and you're like, that's what he's showing me. Yeah, that's that shape. I see it on a real dude all of a sudden, and those connections get made.
Yeah.
And then it starts.
And then you go to someone again. That's that equation. What you know, and then you get that. Then you go to what you see, and you do exactly what he's saying. You go back and forth, and you go, okay, I see it, I know it, I see it, and then you go to someone like Frisetta, and you say, oh, that's what I wish it looked like.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, he put an extra pair of abs in there, but it still works. And you start to realize that here's a guy that's playing with anatomy. He's not copying anatomy. He's a creator of more fantastic anatomy than what you see. And if you're going to be out there designing creatures, characters, DreamWorks, Mandalorian, whatever, I don't care what you're working on, you are going to be asked to design exceptional looking stuff. Stuff that is good or better than reality. Especially if you're in the fantasy imaginative realism, or you're into game art, or I don't know, Wizards of the Coast, or Magic the Gathering.
Really anything. I mean, it really
doesn't matter. And yeah, even if you're doing a fine art painting and you have Indians that are very scantily clad and they're in a war party and they got on horses, you're going to want to stylize out that. And then you start realizing, hey, I can do that with animal anatomy. It's not that different than an assertion's an assertion, an origin's an origin, and a muscle's a muscle. And now I've got this animal creature, because I just taught animal drawing and painting and I'm not an expert in animal drawing and painting, but I can extrapolate from all this kind of learning and quickly adapt it to a lion, to anything. And you would swear that I had studied intense animal anatomy. And I'm like, no, I didn't. But I do understand joints, and I understand insertions, and they're not that different on an animal than they are on a human. They're just in slightly different configurations. So you just got to say, oh, that's an arm. So, and you would see this with Frisetta. He would actually inject human anatomy into his animals. And when, like Bateman, who's one of the best, I'm not as fond of Bateman's wildlife paintings, but he was one of the most famous wildlife painters, but he's hyper real. But when asked who his favorite animal painter was, it was Frisetta. And that's coming from a guy that's academically, like anally, just everything's perfect on the animal. And that's what I say, you want to transcend just academic drawing, right? So everyone's going to be in this equation of what they see, what they know, what they see, and what they wish they saw. Frisetta is way at the far right in what he wishes he saw. Sargent's somewhere far on the far left. In both of those, he has to know a lot, and he sees really well. So he sees and knows, and he's painting a little bit what he wants to see always. Every artist does. But that equation is heavily weighted on the first two parts of the equation, whereas with Frisetta, in order to unlock that third door, you have to be exceptional in the first two, because you can't invent what you don't know. So if you have a photographic memory, like Frisetta probably did, that's highly beneficial, because you can learn more quickly and get to remember. You don't have to work quite as hard at the repetition thing. Now, a lot of us aren't going to be gifted with an eidentic memory. So what do? You draw the same thing a lot. Now, that's boring, right? So we have to stave off boredom. How do we do that? Well, we have to be creative with how we approach it. That's where all these different techniques come in, because otherwise, most normal people without an OCD temperament or something that allows them to do copious amounts of repetition without, for some reason, getting bored. That happens to be me, so I'm very thankful in some ways for that. But, without working with one of those, you have to develop a muscle memory. And you have to develop that muscle memory by practicing, and by drawing, and studying the same thing numerous times. So this book, you would probably, I've gone through this book, and I have a good memory, pretty good memory, but I think I've drawn that book 20 times. Every time I would teach the class, I would probably draw the whole book again, right? So at some point, teaching the class became my way of going back through the book, but it doesn't stave off the boredom of having to go back through that book 25 times and draw 25 different versions of that drawing on 16 different people's drawings in my class. So how many times have I drawn those drawings, or you've drawn those drawings? I don't know, 100 times? Mostly fixing other people's drawings, but that's another way that we found to continue to study what we needed to study, to memorize it, to become intuitive with it, so that I could do something like you've watched the last couple times where I'm talking and demoing at a high level. The only way that that can happen is if one of those, well, ideally, the drawing needs to be just, no thinking whatsoever. It has to be committed to memory. And everyone's going to do that at different speeds. And that's going to have to do with your inherent ability to memorize information visually. And that, unfortunately for most people, 99% of people are going to have to develop that the old-fashioned way, which is sweat equity, which means work, study, diligent study. And that's why you hear me constantly talking about patience, perseverance, persistence, the 3 Ps, talking about SIPD, scan, identify, predict, decide, execute, what you see, what you know, what you wish you saw. These are all ways that you can distill down that process and start getting your head wrapped around how you need to go about studying this stuff, because otherwise you can stay in a fairly same skill level for, I don't know, decades. I've seen people not grow much because they don't know that art of extrapolation, and also Erik, I think, expressed it about as beautifully as I could, but that back and forth. And it's something that I just learned that somehow when I was young. I had done that in sports. I'd done that in other ways. I was very good at self-educating myself for whatever reason. And that was something that maybe I took for granted, but it was something I've always instilled in every one of my students. And all the teachers that are at the school, which were originally my first students, do it in spades. And they all can talk and work and demo. And so I wouldn't say it is kind of a formula. It's something that probably deserves a lot more closer look at, but it is kind of what I think makes our school so special and so effective, is that we do this time and time again with layers of people, and everyone seems to be able to do the same thing, cultivate the same skill doing that. They have to first learn how to understand that, and this is why it's kind of fun to do a book like this, because it starts to concretize those concepts in my own mind and help me to actually clarify them even more. Because now I'm looking back at 30 years of teaching going, whatever we did at that school really works efficiently. And I'm not quite sure, I kind of know what it is, but
I think it's critical thought. More than anything else is critical thought. Teaching people how to, again, you give them this sort of Rosetta Stone that shows them how to self-analyze and self-diagnose, and then pick out what's not working about their drawing and remedy that problem, so that eventually, it's like we have one of the few jobs in the world where our end goal is to make ourselves obsolete. If we do our job right, you don't need us anymore. It's like our job isn't to do a drawing and have you copy a drawing and eventually be able to mimic us. To me, our job is to teach you how to create your own artist, teach you how to self-diagnose and self-analyze and be self-critical in a positive way, where you'll look at your drawing and you'll try to figure out what it is that you're trying to get out of that drawing, figure out where it succeeds and where it comes up short, and then figure out the best way to eliminate that shortcoming. And again, if you're at the school for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I think eventually that rubs off on you, and in a lot of ways you don't need us anymore. Some people choose to stick around because they like the environment and they enjoy the competition. Some people don't enjoy competition so much, and they're a little bit more of an isolated individual, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're going to tend to seek out isolation and self-meditate and self-instruct, which again, if it's our goal, when a student's been at the school for 3 or 4 years, they shouldn't really need my help that much. Whether they decide to stick around or not, I should in a way become obsolete, because they should now have that little Jeff voice or Erik voice in the back of their head saying, think it through, think it through. Are you checking your plumb lines? Are you doing comparative measurement? Are you wedging your forms? Are you thinking dimensionally? All these things, and you're just going through that checklist. And I hear Jeff's voice in my head all the time telling me how good looking I am. and how intelligent I am. But no, it's just going down this checklist from hearing so many of his demos and doing so many tracings for me. Whenever I'm doing a piece at home, I can almost click on that filter and have Jeff do a paint over or do a tracing, because there's this part of my brain that is Jeff now. And to me, that's kind of my job as a teacher, is to create this little room in your memory palace that I live in. And you can open up that door whenever you need it, and you don't need me anymore because you know what I'm going to say.
And that is really, again, a weird business model. But it's one that, again, it was always a challenge for me. And I think it's any good teacher, when you get your goal is to get your student better than you. And that's easy to say. But when you actually do it regularly, how do you respond to that? How there's a human characteristic part of yourself that can get intimidated, can get a little bit, I always saw people, I've been in workshops with people that were exceptional, but I was as good a painter as they were, and they would shut down on me and they wouldn't teach me anything. And I was always a little bit, it didn't surprise me, it disappointed me always, because my goal was to, hopefully get my the only way I could build a school like this was to get you guys good enough to replace me so I could build some other part of the school. And if I couldn't do that, I had to somewhat relinquish the illusion of control over my students, because that's not what you're there to do. You're there to facilitate somebody's development in a compassionate, kind way. Now, I have not always done that all that well. I mean, I'm a very intense teacher, so for me, it has been a challenge. I've grown, I think Erik could say, I've changed quite a bit. Just in the last 5 years, probably 10. But man, I used to be really even more intense, So, that's something that I'll probably never be able to fully, get rid of, and I don't think I should. But it's the same thing. It's an art to teach people anything, and anatomy happens to be one of the linchpin aspects to every artist's development, no matter what you're going to do with it. If you're going to be an animator, a comic artist, a storyboarder, whatever, you're going to need to know your anatomy, and it's one of the hardest things you'll ever learn. I think it's probably the most challenging, because again, I've mentioned, I think in a demo I was doing earlier, that it's kind of like vector calculus physics. It's you're creating the equation as you go, rather than just using an equation and plugging it in and getting a result. So the hardest thing I've had to learn how to do is that there is no the equation is being built simultaneously.
It changes constantly.
Yeah, so if you're looking for an algorithm, if you're looking for a formula, you've probably come to the wrong place. Most of it is just that doesn't really develop unique thinking artists. It develops kind of parodying artists, and copyists. And you can do a decent career as a copyist, but you will probably find at some point that it's a little bit lacking in depth of for your own self.
It goes back to Frisetta again too. It's like, yeah, you can be a great technician and a great copyist, like you said, have a lot of, especially at its highest level, you can be very, very successful and do very well. But people like Frisetta or Rockwell or Sargent or whatever, everyone knows the list, right? It goes on and on and on. But they're more like poets or musicians. Like, you could teach someone to play a musical instrument. I'm terrible. I have a tin ear, can't play anything at all. But I imagine that a skilled enough teacher could teach me to read sheet music and play it robotically, and you'd be able to tell what I was playing. But someone like a Frisetta does that back and forth like we were talking about. He studies the Bridgman, he draws from life, back and forth, back and forth. But then at some point, because of his mindset, and hopefully any artist, it's what we're always chasing, takes that and then makes it their own and starts to compose original music or original poetry, and can't just break down someone else's. That's just the first step, which is what the book is great at. It teaches you to break that down and gut it and analyze it and understand it, but then taking that and elevating it to that level of mastery, like, again, the list, all the artists that every artist will tell you is great, representational figurative artists, their list is going to be the same. It's going to be this, probably 30 people off of the same list of 50 people, if you ask them to list it. And what all those people share in common is that they make it their own, even if it's in a subtle way, like Sargent, or a rather extreme way, like Linedecker. There's guys even more extreme than that. You got a Sheila, whoever. There's guys that take it even further than that. But the foundation is there. They understand how to take what they're seeing and analyze it and break it down and create a system to replicate that. But that's not enough for them. They're not happy being a cover band. They eventually start to make it their own and create this unique, beautiful music or poetry. And again, that's what Frisetta would do. It's like he would put in an extra set of abs, or he would twist the insertion of the calf, or exaggerate the pronation of the ridge muscles, or whatever it was and it was never by accident. You might go, it's like, well, that anatomy is incorrect. And it's like, well, yeah, according to, the Gray's Anatomy or something. Yeah, Goldfinger. Yeah, it's technically incorrect. But if you know anything about dynamics or figure drawing, every single time there's a reason why he did it. And if you look at it and you go, he added in an extra set of abs because he wanted to push that sort of corrugated tube aspect of the human body. He's turning that torso into...
Well, the perfect example I think of is the warrior with ball and chain,
Yeah.
Where you look at like that one.
Yeah.
And it's just like, he's so exaggerated the abs on that, it's ridiculous.
It looks like an accordion.
Yeah, it's like a 12-pack, not a 6-pack.
He turned his midsection into an accordion.
But it works awesome. So, I think we're kind of we're not beating a dead horse, but we're kind of but there's questions that people want to ask.
We've got questions coming in, and we've got some other prepared questions.
Let's do some questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. Well, one that I saw that was kind of interesting here, I can't find the exact one now, but it was somebody asking if you guys had, since Bridgman's so closely related to Frisetta, had you guys ever been to the Frisetta Museum?
Oh my!
And did you have any stories about that?
That's a whole other one. We got to do another one. We did a road trip. Well, I did a trip out to see Frisetta after the Comic-Con, and it's a long story, and I will do Friday Night Live on it sometime because it's worth talking about. It was probably one of the most, I think, unique, special things that's ever happened in my life as far as meeting someone that I admired as a youth. I mean, I drew Frisettas when I was 5. My dad collected his covers way before anyone knew who he even was, and my dad had a big stack of them with a rubber band around them. And I would go down, and my mom would drop me off. I was literally probably 5 years old, 6 years old, and I would just draw Frisettas all day. And my mom, I don't know why she let me do that, but it's awesome. But I remember that and Pink Floyd. Those are my two memories of when I was young. My dad would play Pink Floyd, and I would draw Frisetta. Pretty two combos.
It explains a lot.
Yeah, but not too bad things to be leaned on. But anyway, Frisetta, I met him at him and Ellie at one of the Comic-Cons, and he came by the booth, and I spent a lot of time with him, and he was critiquing one of my paintings, and someone had told me he was going to be there. Anyway, long story short, he invited me to come out and see him, and I did, and it was, I spent probably a good 12, 15, 20 hours with him and his wife, just him and the two of them, and it was a day I'll never forget. Just me and him chatting, looking at his work, asking questions. He had all his originals there, inks that I've grown up with, and it just blew my mind how generous and kind he was, but also how much he exemplified the enthusiasm. I think at that time he was probably mid-70s. We watched a movie called The Night of the Hunter with what was it, Mitchum? And he wanted me to see it. And so we were watching it, and he's sitting on the ground on his knees with a big candy bowl, eating candy, narrating this movie while I'm sitting. It was like freaking Twilight Zone. I mean, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I was sitting there, and I was probably 25 at the time, 26, somewhere in that range, mid-20s, late 20s. And I just couldn't believe it. It was just watching him, how authentically excited and exuberant his personality was. Like how he thought he was like this just really energetic little kid watching this movie, and check out the lighting and look at how they stage it. And you can see he thinks just like a Hitchcock. Like he could see why he was such a good painter, why he was such a good composer, because very much like Erik, he loved movies. He loved the way the light hit the form and the way they directed. And so it was just getting to see a glimpse into his life, personal life, was something else, because I had grown up so infatuated with his work and so excited. It was funny because I almost went into comic work, but I so would have wanted to do it like him that it was difficult for me to even want to go there because I felt like he had done it so iconically well. It just couldn't be better in some ways. So, and I know that's not true, but it just, for me, that's kind of how I felt about it. It was almost like, damn, you know, maybe how Cal Rockwell felt when he followed up Linedecker, you know, it's like, shit, man, this guy's kind of done it. It's about as good as you can do it, you know. But yet he went
Maybe I
in.
can copy his walk.
Yeah. I've never copied everything. But anyway, Frisetta, yeah, so there was, and then later we took a trip out to the Brandywine. All of our teachers, Erik was there, a bunch of the teachers at the time were there, and we did this, we started at the Illustration House in New York, then we went to the Brandywine Museum, then we went to Frisetta's museum and saw him again, and we all got to meet him, and that was kind of a really funny story. And we spent the day talking to him there, and then we went. And what else did we do? Did we go to Philadelphia and do something? I thought we went through Philadelphia.
Yeah, we went to the Philadelphia Metropolitan Museum as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did that. So it was a great trip, and it was just
One
kind
thing
of.
we missed was the Delaware Museum, which has a bunch of
That would have been cool.
files in it. But, yeah.
It was just one of those, you know, like a kind of, you know, like we wanted to just, we were all kind of getting to know each other. We had been around the school for a long time. We were teaching together, but, you know, we wanted to do events like that would help solidify our friendships, you know, because we were basically building a community.
It was sort of the first time we had like a really big group because again before that the school was so small.
Yeah.
So it was
yeah.
the first time we had I think there was what 6, 7.
There was, there was a good group,
Good,
and
good sized group of us.
it was fun, man. It was such a great time, and it was hilarious. Yeah, the memories. It seems like another lifetime ago, but yeah.
That was when we went in that diner and they asked if we were a band.
Yeah, we all had long hair. We all looked like a bunch of pirates, you know.
It was a road trip, so we stopped at this like small diner, like small family restaurant in like some tiny little town in Delaware or something like that. And we all had long hair and earrings and
Everybody was looking like
wearing leather and
motley
like,
crew.
Are you guys a band? It's like, no, man, we're just dorks.
We're just. Well, that was fun. Yeah, you can go. You can fire some questions.
Okay, cool. So how and when should a student study and practice drawing non-existent or imaginary subject matter?
You know, you can try it whenever you want. It's never going to hurt you, and it's actually a great way to check yourself to see where you're at intuitively. Because you can't, you're just going to not be able to invent very well until you know the stuff, you know, and can bend it. You want to kind of emulate a three-dimensional CAD system, kind of one of those apps that we're talking about, to be able to do that in your own head. So you know, Erik's really good at it now, and I watched him get good at it. I got really quite good at it, and then stopped doing it as much because I didn't go in a direction that required it as much. But my teaching, I continued to do it in. But inventions in art, in and of itself, man, it's the kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, where there's not a lot to hide behind. You have to build off of, you know, everyone has a different way of doing it. I mean, you might want to take this one. You've got great skills in invention now.
I mean, as far as like how much you should do it, I always tell my students to try to set aside 20% of your allotted art time, you know, whatever that is. If you have 10 hours a week to study, I would say that 2 hours of that should always be dedicated towards fun time. It's still study, but it's something that isn't quite so technically driven. So if that's what you're into, like if you want to go into a field that's highly inventive, highly imaginative, like concept design or comics or animation, where you're going to be doing a lot of it, I would say that would take up a good percentage of that 20%. So, you know, whatever time that you're putting into art each week, 20% of it is fun time or maintaining your passion is probably a better way of putting it, because I find that a lot of students, especially once they start getting heavily into technical study, they become enamored with that, and it becomes just about the technical study, and they forget why they started learning the technical stuff in the first place. So if you want to get into comics and you start pursuing your technical education, don't stop drawing comics. If you want to do concept design, don't stop designing cool characters and cool environments. If you want to be a fine artist, don't stop easel painting. Don't ever stop doing that stuff. That should always take up about 20% of your time. And again, if you want to go into a field, I imagine if you're asking that question, it's because you want to go into a field like comics or animation or concept design, something like that. So that would take up a good chunk of that 20%. I would think it would be, you know, that and copying people who do it well would take up that 20%. So you can't just say, hey, how much should you be doing it? 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. And also at the end of the day, like if you play around with it, like if you're doing Bridgman or this, do the drawing. Like if say you have 3 hours of work, do 2.5 hours of academic study by copying the Bridgman everything, put it away, go for, have dinner, come back, and finish your last half an hour by inventing something that you did that evening and see if it comes back out. Give it a little time to dissipate, so it feels like it's like, 20 minutes, 30 minutes while you're eating dinner. Come back and say, okay, I'm putting all my stuff away, and I'm going to try one more of those torso drawings I just did, but with no reference out whatsoever, and see if you can actually make it believable, right? That's the only way you're going to know if that information is in your head. Otherwise, what you did is you did develop a little bit better eye, and you got better dexterity. But unless that visual information can be recalled and used in clutch situations, then it really needs to be done more times until it is. Now, that's just kind of a little game you can play with yourself to help kind of inch your way into invention is by...
And that's the thing, don't forget that invention isn't just cold blank invention.
No.
It's part drawing from memory, it's part idealization. So like one of the exercises that Jeff used to have us do would be to take, again, long time ago, TV Guide. TV Guide was a little tiny guide that you would get that would tell you what was going to be on TV on all the different channels. Well, it was this tiny, about that big.
Yeah, the book was tiny.
Like 4 by 6 or something, whatever size it was. It was small. And what you would do is in there they would have these little tiny black and white grainy photos of celebrities. So we would take that and then do a full page drawing of it.
Yeah, draw it like...
Well, okay, not invention. You're drawing from a piece of reference, but you're taking this little tiny crummy 1956 yearbook photo and you're blowing it up. So you're having to inject a lot of information. So
and break things down into essential shapes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not invention. Like if you ask most people who are good at invention, they're rarely just sitting down and just completely cold inventing. Really what it is they're remembering a pose from a figure drawing class, or they're remembering a leg from the Bridgman book, or they're filling in the gaps, or they take, and Jeff and I have both done this, you take this little figure, little background figure from like a Frisetta inking or something like that, and then you sort of riff on that and twist it and turn it into your own thing, and well, that's not invention as most people think of it, but by the time you're done with it,
it's your piece.
Yeah, it's come completely out of your head. It was just inspired by.
There's extremely few people, and mostly comic guys, that can really just go like a Kim Jong-ji or someone that they just go like from nothing to a scene or whatever. That's really rare, from what I've seen. I mean, it's all and
even he would tell you that it's like the way he got there was, he and one of his friends would pick a theme like, oh, it's elephants this week, and they would do nothing but draw elephants for a week. And so by the time you've drawn nothing but elephants for a week, you can draw one out of your head, but he's still drawing on all those photographs that he drew from.
I think what he's doing is this kind of disciplined effort mixed with a photographic memory, probably. Yeah. So when you have an eidetic memory and you have a discipline as if you don't, wow, you're gonna get some pretty amazing stuff. But that's an art. That's an art we could talk hours about. We could have a whole. I mean, again, we could do one of these on all these kind of things. Maybe we should. But anyway,
it really comes down to just drawing until. Actually, I heard a saying recently that you might as well have said it because it's such a Jeff saying. But it's like you do it not until you get it right, but you do it until you can't get it wrong. And that's what you do. You draw something over and over and over again, not until you can draw it right, but until you can't draw it wrong. And once you get to that point, you can draw it out of your head. All of a sudden, drawing the figure just becomes a way of thinking for you. It's like breathing. You can't not do it.
I think the big misnomer is that some people have the skill to invent and some don't. That's just malarkey. I mean,
there's aptitudes.
There's aptitudes, but I'm just saying that you're going to
can be learned.
You're going to get to it through hard work and repetition. Pretty much, repetition is the mother of skill. It always will be. It just is. But so the key is learning to love repetition. I don't care how you get there, what you do, how you trick yourself into repetition. Hopefully not like compulsive eating or things of that sort. Because by the time you're good at eating, you'll be like 350 pounds by the time you're good at drawing. But you want to try to reward yourself, and you want to play games, and you want to learn to know yourself really well. Like, how do you learn? I mean, everyone's different. Are you kinesthetic? Do you like to touch things? Do you like to read things? Do you like to digest through what means? So we're pretty good at. I can tell very quickly what somebody's aptitudes are just from how many years I've been doing it. And get a read on them, and then understand how to navigate that person's eccentricities. And
It's
most,
something to always realize that 99 times out of 100, probably more than that, but just say 99% of the time, if someone's better at you than at something, it's probably because they've either been doing it longer or they work at it harder. It's the aptitude part of it is, yeah, it's there. Certainly, I mean, I have certain aptitudes that I thank God every day that I've got, because it definitely plays into what I love to do. But that's such a small part of it. That aptitude is almost more just a love of something. Like you mentioned, I love movies.
Yeah.
Well, it's not work to me. I'll break it down. It's fun, but I'm still learning. But it's fun.
And the neat thing is whether it's an aptitude. I mean, like, I have an aptitude for anatomy because I love it. I also have an aptitude for color, which I was given as almost like a gift. You know, I mean, I don't study color. I've never studied color. I don't really want to study color. I just enjoy color. And quite frankly, I just think of it very intuitively. I've never really wanted to think more about it. I feel it. I work through it that way. And I rely on my edges, my values, my shapes, and my design to carry my color. Or my color carries that afterwards. But color is just one of those magical things that, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a good color sense, God, man, that's a good one to have if you're going to have one.
But your dad's knack for perspective and visualization.
Crazy.
He'll just create a scene, and it's like, yeah, he's got that aptitude for sure, but I also know that he'll bring in a stack of books this high and recite, like, you know, chapter and verse where you can find a certain piece of information. So it's not the aptitude. Yeah,
he was
is there, but he's also read through those books and copied them and drawn out of them. It's almost uncanny. He'll pull out a book and say, "Yeah, I think it's in like chapter 3, about 4 pages in," and you're like, "Man, there it is." Yeah, so yeah,
I think he might have a bit of a photographic memory too. Yeah,
certainly there's a bit of that there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. I think we're about an hour in. We didn't get to the questions, but if you want to ask us some, or if you want to go between some of the questions that you have.
I mean, if they've got questions
Yeah,
from
if you've
real
got-
people,
I mean, yeah.
A lot of the ones that I had written down previously are stuff that you guys talked about sort of in the
cool.
beginning.
So
Yeah, I mean, there's at least a couple more in here.
Let's
that
do
we
it.
can-
Let's do a couple
we
more.
can answer. First of all, Mr. Ryan Heitman says, "Hello from Portland.
Ryan.
Good to see you two handsome fellows chatting it up."
you good, Ryan. Your quick sketch is looking good, Ryan. I have to say.
Okay, so somebody asks, you have started with the torso. Do you plan to do the arms and legs book/course? I would imagine that would be all of what you do. I don't know if Bridgman has anything more useful to offer.
I love his hands, the way he does it. I don't think it really needs to be really expanded on much. His hands seem to me to be an area I always thought he was extremely good at. The drapery is a little rough, but Erik did such a phenomenal job on the drapery and in the program. I mean, you extrapolated a lot from him, I'm sure.
It's definitely a different take on it, but yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
information
so
is that.
I would say, I kind of
His
skip.
heads, I would love to see you do, because his heads are so weird,
Ah,
but I would love to
sure.
see your take on the information.
Well, what I may do is I have a small female book that he did, which is very odd, and it's called Bridgman's Female Form. I don't think I've ever even seen it very often. It's a tiny book, and it's about this big, and I got it from some users, it's like really old, and I think I've only seen the copy I have of it actually. But I shot Zara in all the poses in that book, and in the other one, the rhythmical cool. So I would like to do something with maybe the rhythms. Like if I did a Riley book, it would probably maybe have some of that mixed in the front of it or something. Would be talking about the rhythm, the insertions and rhythms that because he has a great section on rhythms in the front of that book. But again, the drawings are like so goofy. They're like quick sketches, but they're really highly animated and could be done better. But
talks a lot about balance and
distribution of
crown
weight.
molding
And, yeah, I know it gets kind of wild. So that book is huge. I mean, that book is ridiculous. So what I really try to do is focus on the meat of it, which is, again, arms, legs, torso, front, back. That's 3/4 of that book. The hands are great in there. I may extrapolate. It really depends on how it does. Is it well received? It's an experiment. I've never done a book like that before, so we'll see. I mean, I definitely want to do the legs and arms is in the works, but it'll be a ways off. But this one will keep you tied up for quite a while. And then Erik's, of course, classes online are going to, which also, I mean, when we're done with it, the online program will probably have over 130 hours of anatomy at least.
Oh, yeah.
150 probably. And that's just, you could just do all your anatomy just rolling through that. I mean, in my opinion, I'll have Brian do a real simple one at some point, and that'll be more of a Hampton-y style one. And then, because he's so good at that. And and then we'll have basic, and then we'll have Bridgman, and then we'll have the intensives, and then we'll have probably, we also have, we have hands and feet, we have foreshortening. I mean, geez, yeah, we've got a lot of anatomy. Everything, and then all the drawing classes have anatomy, whether it's 20-minute lands
It
or.
would be fun to do a dynamic or functional anatomy where you actually show what happens to the anatomy in its basically three main states, because that's something that always confused me when I was first starting.
Yeah, my sketchbook, I did some of that where it's like
Yeah.
relaxed, flexed, in between, whatever. I did little drawings of different aspects of the arm as it flexes from relaxed to and what happens to that. Yeah.
Taut or relaxed or flexed. Yeah, it's
There's so much you could do. That's the thing is you need 10
never
lifetimes,
ends. Yeah,
right?
never
And
ends.
I'm gassing out here a little bit, you guys. I've been at this a long time. You look at the beard, tells the story. Come on.
Not me, I'm in my prime.
Somebody asked you if you're bringing back the beard.
No, I think I'm going to keep it short. I don't really want to.
That's just from today.
That grew
I was
up.
clean
Yeah.
shaven this morning.
It's really good. It's almost
Oversensitive.
scary. It is less than a week. It comes in fast. But no, I think I'll stay away from the beard for a little bit. Probably just keep it, scrubby.
Okay, so this one comes from Zeb Posada, who's
Hey,
one
Zeb.
of our online students. Very important question. Did you watch The Mandalorian today?
Yes.
I didn't watch it, so don't say anything.
Okay.
I'll watch it tonight when I get home.
Oh, you're gonna love it.
I love them, man. They're good.
You're gonna love this.
Dude,
It's so good.
shit. See, anyone out there that thinks you're not going to be able to make it as an artist, the whole world is designed by us. So just freaking relax and get good. You'll be freaking good to go. The whole world. So I just keep laughing at people that say, "Can you make a living as an artist?" I'm like,
Ask Andrew Jones and Doug Chang if they can make it as artists.
well, not that.
Yeah,
Just the thing you guys got to remember is just you got to be freaking good. That's end all be all. Just be good, and the rest will take care of itself. You don't need to be magical. You just need to be good. And that's magical enough these days. And there's a lot of good people out there, don't get me wrong. And I do love digital. So for those of you guys out there that think that I'm slamming digital all the time, I love it. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will. But it's gorgeous for concepting, man. You can't beat it.
So this sort of ties into what you guys were just talking about a little bit, but somebody asked, what were different ways that artists who left your program diversified their income?
Now what was it?
How do they make money off of their art?
Basically.
Oh God, yeah. A lot of it really depends on how entrepreneurial you are. Look at Stan, for example. Prokopenko, Proko. He's an amazing example of someone that extrapolated. He was with us for probably 13 years or something.
Long time.
Yeah, a long
I don't know if it was
time.
quite that long, a long time.
And he started very young. So again, some people have a very entrepreneurial spirit, and some people like to tread that particular avenue. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not everybody that should do that. Some people find it a little bit better to work underneath somebody, and some people prefer big companies like Blizzard and ILM and DreamWorks. Other people prefer small startups where they have more freedom. Where they're lead concept of a smaller company where they can have a lot more leeway than a bigger company. So a lot of our when you start out, a lot of people will enter into, as a student, some people will do caricatures at Legoland. They'll work and do things like that, which can be really good for like summer jobs, and you can make $20 an hour, $30 an hour if you're a really good salesperson. Other people will do storyboarding. I always encourage people to get good at storyboarding. Storyboarding is a very highly lucrative area. They always need good boarders. And you can get an agency to represent you, and they take a pretty good chunk, but they'll get you more than you ever could get, and they'll get you lots of work. And it's really not that hard to do boarding. Boarding you can ramp up pretty quick if you have good quick sketch skills, you have good general drawing skills. I think that's a good entry point area. Erik,
but also invest in yourself. That's one of the biggest things. Try to hang on to rights as often as you can. So if you're working for a smaller company, and you're not doing anything that's specifically on brand, if you go work for Marvel or DC or Disney or something, they're going to own everything you do, and you're not going to be able to fight that. But if you work for a smaller company and they have you do a painting of a wizard, well, it's wizard. It's not. If it's not a specific character, fight for those rights, negotiate, and say, hey, you're not paying, all you're paying far from top rates. I'd like to have, the second rights usage. So then you can make prints, you can put it on a T-shirt, you can resell the illustration a year down the road to another client. So the more you can hang on to rights and stuff, you can monetize those rights So while great art skills are really, really, that's where you're going to make most of your money because people are going to pay you to make artwork for them. But another important thing to remember is that anything you create that you can hang on to the rights for, you never know where that might pay off down the road, and you might be able to monetize those rights. Just ask George Lucas. I mean, the guy made so much money off of having the toy rights.
Another thing in the defense of traditional artists is that you can sell your originals.
Yeah.
And I know Erik and Lucas and all of our guys at our school that do card work and do stuff for magic. They make a good portion of their living off selling the original paintings to collectors on the back end market, not for the job. They get paid for the job, which a lot of times pays a portion of what they would get for the original, but then they can go sell that original, and it's part of a brand that's really iconic, so it's easy to sell that original to a collector. So you're kind of leveraging the company you're working for to sell an original, and they don't have a problem with that, really.
And coincidentally, I think we actually owe Ellie Frisetta for that. Is that she was one of the first people that she represented Frank in a lot of his business dealings, and one of the things she would do is she would go to him and say, we want the originals back, because back then it wasn't standard practice to get the originals back because you were usually shipping the painting off them, and really it's more that they were lazy more than anything else. They just didn't want to ship the artwork back to the artist, and so they would keep it. And so some stuff has disappeared, especially early comic book stuff, like just Marvel would hang on to that stuff and got filed away somewhere and it's gone. But Ellie was one of the first ones to kind of stand up for the artists and say, hey, we want the originals back. We need to get those back. And that's why the family owns so many of his originals.
Yeah, and they fought for some of those. Because once people got on to how good he was, they didn't want to give him back, and they had to fight to get him back. But yeah, I mean, that's huge. So,
So that goes to rights again. Hang on to as many of your rights. So now clients are going to hate me. Don't let them bully you, because a lot of them will just send out that boilerplate contract that's based off of companies like Marvel and DC and Disney, where they own the rights in perpetuity on Earth and all other planets. Like, literally, that's in the contract. I don't know if that's an urban legend or not, but I've heard from several people that's in the contract.
Why not?
Disney's thinking ahead to when we have a colony on Mars, right? And they want to own the rights to it on Mars, which isn't unreasonable, right? It's not going to be that long. So it's that type of thing. And again, Marvel, DC, Disney, companies like that, most of their income comes from owning the rights to those characters. That's where a huge amount of their income comes from. But these smaller companies, they don't have the same standing. So yeah, if you want to work for a big company, Blizzard or someone like that.
But they're going to pay you for that, right?
Yeah, they're going to
say,
pay you considerably
we're going to pay
better.
you considerable more because
you get other things from it. You get the exposure. You work on Spider-Man. Well, now you get the exposure of Spider-Man. So
a lot of I think what people don't realize as artists and business artists, and I know many of them, and I'm pretty good at it, and I know a lot of us, is just basically understanding how valuable your skill sets really are to these companies, right? And thinking not in terms of, I am just so thankful to get to work for this company that I'll do it for free. You don't want to have that attitude. I mean, you may feel that way, but don't sell yourself that way, right? You go in as a business person and you say, hey, this is business, right? Okay, I got my business hat on now, right? You obviously want my skills. We're going to sit down, we're going to portfolio, then we're going to negotiate what it is we're going to. Now, first of all, you can't negotiate if you don't have very good skills from which to negotiate from, right? That's the key linchpin that everybody doesn't get. It's like if you are able to do what a small portion of people do, you are in the driver's seat, you have huge negotiation skills. You don't even have to be good at negotiating. You just have to know what you have and how valuable it is to somebody. And then you can negotiate. It's like the negotiations are already in your favor. If you do what 52,000 other people do, then you're stuck just taking whatever they're willing to give you because they can replace you in 2 seconds. So it's just common sense.
Or even further than that, cutting them out of the picture altogether. Again, just like you said, spending 20% of your study time on fun stuff. Same thing when you're a professional. It can be really hard, especially when you're starting out. But at some point, set aside 20% of your time to work on your own projects. One of my good friends, Chris Seaman, he has his own IP, which is Cameo Creeps. And it started out just doing these little tiny monster portraits, like super tiny monster portraits, and he would sell the originals. Well, they become so popular with people that he actually has turned it into his own collectibles line that has now been picked up by Diamond, and he has a novel coming out, and working on doing a board game. I mean, a chunk of his income is now coming from something that he owns. So if anyone wants to make a Cameo Creeps cartoon, he's going to get a piece of that. If someone wants to make a Cameo Creeps comic book, he's going to get a piece of that.
Remember when we had Doug Tenaple in here?
Yeah.
And Doug was Earthworm Jim. I mean, dude, he was a student of ours for a while, right? And he was DreamWorks Interactive. He owned the company. He would pitch constantly. He would come up with a comic book, take it to the Comic-Con, pitch it, and they would turn it into a children's, and he would sell the rights, and they would turn it into a Nickelodeon Sunday. You know, I mean, the guy was like, I mean, he was good. He was an incredible businessman, and really forward-thinking, extremely creative. And I used to always enjoy chatting with him a little bit about what he did. You know, I mean, because I remember back when
he
was
very early on turned his entire income into essentially making a graphic novel and then licensing the rights to that graphic novel out to various different companies. Even if it never got made into a cartoon, you know, companies like DreamWorks will come in and pay you, you know, whatever amount of money you negotiate for the rights, and then it might sit on a shelf, but you still made a good chunk of money off of that.
There's a lot of. I mean, again, that gets into the. You could do a whole. I mean, you could do a rigorous amount on the art of the business of art, but really, what I always go back to is first and foremost get good, right? That should be your main focus. Portfolio development. Until you get good, what do you develop? What kind of portfolio you're putting together? When do I put a portfolio together of what? I mean, I think you should always have a portfolio of your best life drawings, of your best gouache paintings. When I went to work for DreamWorks, I submitted to be a conceptor for them when I was probably 26, and I got accepted finally as a lead concept, offered a lead concept job for DreamWorks. And at the time, my portfolio was, I had a whole section of life drawings, I had a whole section of life paintings, I had sections of plein air paintings, I had sections of everything you could imagine, and inks, everything you could think of, storyboard samples, creature and character designs. I mean, every medium, gouache, acrylic, whatever. I mean, it was unbelievable how diverse my portfolio was. It was very well put together, but it was the skills that sold them. It wasn't even. I had no digital skills whatsoever, and they had no worries about that. They said, we will get someone to teach you that. What you know how to do, we can't find, right? We can teach you the other stuff in 6 months.
But it goes back to that fun time too.
Yeah.
That
Like all this was
20%
just
once
playing
you're
around.
Yeah,
I spent from 20 years old to 30 years old or 30 something was I'm going to try as many different careers, play around with as many different things, and not commit to anything. So I ended up with a very diverse portfolio because I did. I had a book cover rep. I tried gallery work. I worked in different kinds of galleries. I did Marvel work, and I did comic covers and heavy metal covers, and I was just doing everything, and everything that interested me. And it was fun time for me. I was just really having fun trying to figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life. And as a result, I ended up with eclectic skills all over the place that were really cool, and did a lot of freelance with a lot of different things. So when I went to pitch for some of my DreamWorks, I had this portfolio that was so diverse. The only thing they asked me, they didn't care if I had a degree or anything. They just said, "How did you get so good so young?" Was their question. Like, where did you go? What did you do? You know, I mean, because I had such a weird. I was in mid-20s, and I had like a huge portfolio of different stuff and skill sets. And then I could also teach, and I ran a school, and so I had good people skills. So it was very appealing to them because it was like, oh, here's a guy we can use for background. We can use him for, he's good in landscape. He can also do character designs. He can also manage other people. He can possibly do, so they're thinking, well, maybe direct, maybe this, maybe that. I mean, they're thinking from a business standpoint of what can we use this person for? How diverse are they? Now, they may hire someone like Mobius or someone that has such a specific iconic style simply for one project and say, we want you to concept for this movie because we like your look.
Right. We want the Mobius look.
Yeah, the Mobius look. Or we want, Sid Mead or something, and they'll
Which
do
is
that.
Ironically, is more the tack that I've taken.
Yeah.
I wanted to do like one thing. Like from the time I walked in the door, pretty much I wanted to do horror and I wanted to do superhero comics.
God, man, my hats off to you, Eric, for sticking to your guns.
So.
You've done amazingly well that way.
But it's just everybody's path is different. There's no one right way to do it.
No.
But do what you love, because you're going to be doing it a long time.
Yeah.
So do what you love.
Let's wrap it up with one more.
Okay. This is a really good question, I thought. A question for both of you. With so much experience, do you have an off day when your drawings or paintings are not coming out the way you want them to, or is it now an effortless, subconscious endeavor?
Every day.
I love these questions. I mean, it's like my dad always told me that it never gets any easier.
No.
It never does.
Every day.
Well, and the expectations you have on yourself. Like right now, I with the pandemic and everything. I mean, I'm teaching, but I there's not a lot of gallery stuff going on. I'm not really in the gallery scene right now, anyway, deliberately. So your skills suffer a little bit when you don't train all the time. They really do. And we haven't been working from live models, right? We haven't been able to book models. So we've been teaching a lot of streaming, which is great. And thank God, because it keeps my hand really going, and it does keep me critiquing and keeps those neuro pathways. Because remember, what wires together fires, or what fires together wires together. So, or where your attention goes, your energy flows, right? So you build these neural pathways, and they have to be maintained. And they've even shown this now in epigenetics and stuff, where you'll see the neurons when you're learning something. They go like this, and they kind of get closer and closer, and then they merge, and it's more of an intuitive thing. And then as you stop doing it, they start growing apart. And they filmed it. You can see the little neurons doing as someone's learning something. You can see them coming in and starting to grow towards each other, and it's kind of creepy looking, but when you're not doing it, they go the other way, right? So it doesn't take long of not doing something to start. Like if you're an elite level executor and you have to pull one stroke, like where you flick the wrist and you flick it like that and you're done and you never touch it again. The minute that starts breaking down, that stroke's not going to go like that, right? And it only takes a fraction of a separation of those neurons to, I think, to keep you from doing work like that. So, you have to be vigilant, right? You get good by hard work, and then you maintain that through not as hard work, right? But diligent, consistent, and luckily, hopefully at the time you're getting paid, so you're really keeping those neural pathways open as your job, right? And you're getting paid to do it, right? So yeah, you can get rusty, and you can, and it's hard, man. It's hard. It's a lifelong commitment to skills, and the skills, like the old saying is an old, I think it's a Latin saying: once you have it up, keep it up. I don't want to say it in Latin, but once you have it up, keep it up, because it's easy to maintain, hard to get back. So once you're at an elite level, it's not that hard to maintain that level with just diligent practice and regular execution. But if you let it lapse for 6 months, or you don't do anything, or you get injured, like I have to get a shoulder surgery on my good arm coming up, probably. I'll probably have to be out for 6 months, maybe a year. That's gonna, I cringe at what that's gonna look like, right? Because that's not what I want to hear, My own fault, so I just have to deal with it. But sometimes
you're gonna get good with your left hand.
Yeah. I'm gonna start painting left-handed. Yeah, probably. Yeah, there you go. But it's doable. But I'm just saying that I'm just a huge believer in just maintaining, and that's why when people say, "Well, is it ever easy?" No, because you still got to. It's like if you're a professional athlete and you said, "Hey, do you really still like going to the gym?" They'd be like, "No, man, but I got to compete on Saturday, or I got to compete next season, and if I don't do it, man, it's not gonna work."
What I like less than going and doing it every day is not being as good as I once was.
Yeah, there you go. So as long as you want to be really going at it, you're going to be working at it, and it's going to be hard. So does it get easier? No, but do the rewards get higher, and do you get more satisfaction? Yeah, but if you're elite, you want to be even better. You just want to keep bettering yourself. It's not like you want to, crush competition to other people. It's not that kind of a competition, but it is with yourself, right? So you're going to know, like I know how I used to draw in 1998 when I was teaching 14 classes a week in charcoal. And I don't draw like that as much anymore. I mean, I'm better in some ways overall. I would say I'm better, but...
And you can get back to that.
Yeah, but I would have to focus all my energy on that one thing, and then my oil paintings would get weaker. My portraits would suffer a little bit, right? So it's a balancing act, and that's all. And you will be balancing and learning better ways of balancing for the rest of your life. And the better you get at that, it becomes more intuitive. But just the rewards get greater, the satisfaction's more, but the expectations are more. So it just all goes up together, and you just have to know that.
My answer is a lot simpler, and because I don't know, maybe it's not a weird combination, but in my mind, I'm this weird combination of filled with self-loathing and daydreamer, that I always wake up thinking I'm going to do something great. And what I tell people is I always wake up every morning thinking I'm going to be Rockwell, and I go to bed each night just myself again. and that's the way it always is. I always think that today's going to be the day that it's all going to come together, and everything I've learned is going to make magic. And usually around about lunchtime, I just, it's a grind through the second half of the day because nothing's turned out the way that I dreamt it would. And so it's just this weird combination. Seriously, she has to put up with it every single day. That it's like no, I got to get to work. I'm so excited. I want to paint. And then round about lunchtime, it's like, oh, do I have to go back to work? Oh, and then it's not that I don't love it. I love every minute of doing it. and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. It's so psychologically scarring going through it. But this gap between what you want to be and what you end up being, and of course it's a sliding scale. That the older you get, the better you get. Like if you had told 18-year-old me that 46-year-old me would be as good as I am, he'd be over the moon. Wouldn't be able to believe it. Would be so excited. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna be able to do that. Like, look at what I do every day, and I'm gonna get to do that. And he'd probably cry. He'd be so happy. And 46-year-old me looks at it and goes, I've been doing this for 25 years, and this is where I am. This is what I've got. It's like, so it's just, and I think everybody is. It's that dark muse. You have to have it, otherwise.
And you don't let any of the this is all just. It is what it is, but again, it's a wonderful life. It really is. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I mean, there's no perfect anything. This is not Club Med down here. It's an interesting place. And
the day you're happy with where you are is the day you don't ever go anywhere else.
Yeah,
so
I think the main. I mean, we've gone all over the place tonight. We've taken a bit of a journey. So really. I think closing on that, I just want to thank Erik for coming in and taking his time. I mean, I don't get to see him as much as I used to during this time, and I know all of you guys are feeling the burn on everything. So I would just say, hopefully we can all together raise ourselves up a bit and come out of this a little bit smarter, a little bit more, appreciative and all that. I know I am, but we'll be back at it soon, and hopefully we'll get to see some of you in either a streaming class or maybe in the actual brick and mortar when we open back up. We'll probably shooting for maybe summer. Would be probably the reality of it. Maybe spring, but I would say summer probably would be the safer bet. And then I think we're on the backside of all this. So just take care of yourselves out there. Thanks for joining us. If you like what we're doing on this channel, please subscribe and tell your friends and spread it around. We're going to try to get it a little bit more robust and kind of turn it into something where we can have the impetus to do it a little bit more regularly for y'all. But right now, I did want to do a month of the Bridgman, kind of like I did last year with the inking, and we'll try to be a little bit more regular. But it'll probably be next year sometime we'll start to do regular content. But we really want to spread the word. So if anything you can do, we really would appreciate it. If you want to pick up the book, I think it'll be a nice helpful book for you to have in your studio or your quiver of books on anatomy and enjoy it and let me know what you think about it. And Erik's got great content online and with us, and there's plenty out there. So thank you, and all the best. Have Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that kind of good stuff, and I really appreciate your support. So thanks so much.
Cool. Sounds good.